Am I the jerk for telling off my parents for giving my kids a hard time about speaking a foreign language in front of them? Burner for privacy. I am American. My wife is from a foreign country, though she did her post-secondary studies in the United States. She comes from a small country, the language of which is not widely spoken elsewhere. Once our relationship became serious, I decided to learn her language. I have always had an interest in languages and a facility for learning them. I speak 2 other languages besides English and my wife's language. With her and her family's help, I have become near fluent. When we had children, twin boys who are 8 years old, we decided to raise them to speak both languages. This decision was partly so they could communicate more easily with their relatives on my wife's side, and partly as a way to keep them connected to my wife's culture. A few years ago, we bought a small vacation property in my wife's country, where we spend a couple of weeks each summer. This has both helped my and my children's facility with the language, and has in turn made our time more enjoyable because we all speak the language. For reasons I cannot quite understand, this has always seemed to irritate my parents. They were sour about the fact that some of the toasts at our wedding were in my wife's language, though we translated them. My mother, a former teacher, claimed that attempting to raise the kids bilingual risked causing language delays. I told them that I appreciated their concern, but that we had done our research and felt it would be good for the kids. They kept bringing it up for the first few years of the kids' lives, until it was clear they were both highly precocious in verbal skills. These days we speak a mix of both languages at home. The children often speak to each other in my wife's language, especially when sorting something out between themselves. The problem is that my parents get annoyed when they hear it. They justify their annoyance on multiple grounds, all flimsy in my view. That if they are watching the kids, they need to know what they are talking about to properly supervise. That the children could be using it as a secret language to say disrespectful things, and that allowing it might cause issues at school with teachers or peers. It has never proved a problem for anyone but my parents. Recently, my parents were over, and one child spoke to the other in the foreign language. I was in the other room and heard my mother gently reprove them, saying, "It's rude to speak in a language we cannot understand. I need to tell you this because your parents want." At that point, I had enough and stormed in, telling my parents that they need to drop it. They can have lots of 95% English time with their grandkids, or they can insist on 100% English and have 95% less time. My dad got upset and said they were only looking out for the kids because we have a blind spot about this and that. I should apologize to my mother. I rolled my eyes and said, "Sorry," in my wife's language, which got a laugh out of my kids but caused my parents to leave. Am I the jerk? The grandparents and kids were sitting together in the living room. Everyone was reading quietly. Son number 1 was reading a book in the foreign language that son number 2 had already read. He was confused by something and asked his brother in the foreign language to help explain what he was not understanding in the story. The inference that my parents may be racist is plausible and possibly not without foundation. However, with respect to this situation, the language is a Central Eastern European one, so everyone involved would be Caucasian. My wife is a different religion from my family. They have generally gotten along fine with my wife, other than this maddening language hang-up. One other piece of context is that all my grandparents spoke Yiddish as their first language and never taught it to either of my parents. They used it as a secret language when my parents were growing up. None of my grandparents spoke it by the time I was born. I do wonder if some of their sensitivity springs from this experience. You behaved properly. I have cousins who are trilingual and learning more languages. Both are young and learned 3 languages from birth due to their parents being from different countries. It's widely recognized that knowing multiple languages is a strong indicator of academic success. Your parents' views on this are quite ridiculous. Am I the jerk for telling my sister-in-law to go for self at her baby's sip and see? My wife's sister, Jen, who is 33 years old, and her husband, Matt, who is 35 years old, welcomed their first child about 4 months ago. Jen did not want a baby shower but decided on doing a sip and see for close relatives to meet the baby. This happened last Saturday. My wife had met the baby before this event, but it was my first time seeing them since the birth. About 2 months ago, my father passed away unexpectedly in his sleep. It has been a really difficult time for me, but I am in therapy and on antidepressants, both of which are helping. I was not really looking forward to attending the sip and see, but it meant a lot to my wife that I come with her, and she kind of pressured me to come since I had not seen the baby yet. The event was just close family, about 15 of us in total, and very informal. About an hour into the event, Jen asked me if I wanted to hold the baby. I told her I did not really want to, but she pretty much shoved the baby into my arms. She then sat next to me and told me that she was sorry about my father and that they regretted not being able to attend the funeral because of the baby. I thanked her and told her not to worry about the funeral as I understood. She then went on this weird tangent about a new life springing from death and the renewal of energy. I had no idea what she was talking about and just kind of nodded along. Then she said that she hopes seeing and holding a beautiful baby will help me get over my loss. It was a weird comment, and I looked at her and told her, "No, this is not helping me get over the death of my father." She got defensive and told me that it was supposed to be a joyous day to celebrate a new life and that I should be happy and not dwell on my father's death. I did not want to cause a scene in front of everyone, but I was angry. I handed Jen her baby back and leaned in close to her and whispered, "Go fuck yourself, Jen." I then got up and walked over to my wife and told her that I needed to leave. I told her she could stay if she wanted, but I needed to get out of there as soon as possible. She asked me why, and I told her I would talk to her about it on the drive home or later if she wanted to stick around. By that time, Jen had gotten up and was on a warpath. She came up to me, still holding the baby, and poked her finger at me, telling me I had no right to talk to her like that. That got everyone's attention, and now everyone was looking at us. Matt came over to ask what was going on. My wife was confused. Jen was basically yelling. The baby was starting to cry. It was a mess. I told my wife I needed to leave and that she needed to make a decision right then. She ended up coming home with me. I explained what happened on the drive home, and she said she understood why I was upset by Jen's comments and agreed she was out of line, but I should not have said that to her. My wife has been getting a lot of grief from Jen and her parents, basically calling me the biggest asshole they have ever met. I do not even know if an apology will help. You are not at fault here. Jen made your father's death about her and her baby, which is weird. She handed you her baby when you clearly didn't want to hold it, and then spouted some pseudo-spiritual poetic BS that you didn't ask for. You're also grieving, and she kept pushing and became defensive even after you said it wasn't helping. She could have simply apologized, gathered her child, and moved to another guest. Am I the jerk for refusing to discuss my nephew with my parents? My husband, who is 30 years old, and I, who am 28 years old, have custody of my 7-year-old nephew for 5 months now. CPS removed him from the custody of my sister and brother-in-law, who are both 33 years old. My husband and I stepped up to take my nephew. We have a caseworker who works closely with us and with my sister and brother-in-law. Dottie. Being honest, for the sake of the post, I suspect my husband and I will be raising our nephew for the rest of his childhood. To give some context, my sister has 2 children with my brother-in-law, my nephew and my 4-year-old niece. She was born with cancer, and while they removed it quickly then, it returned a year ago and caused a very bad shift in the dynamic between them and my nephew. They were quick to anger with him and ignored him in favor of my niece. The only time they really appeared to interact with him was when they forced him to visit his sister in the hospital. During one of those visits, he wanted some attention. They scolded him. He started to cry. They got mad at him for upsetting his sister and started yelling until a nurse came to intervene. The hospital social worker was called in, and by the end, my nephew said he just wanted her to die so he could have them back. My sister and brother-in-law lost their temper even more. They could not be calmed. They called my nephew all kinds of names and wished he would die instead for sucking up attention from his sister. When CPS was looking to place him with family, my parents also wanted to take him, but they were denied because it was believed they would not listen to the caseworker and would take him to see his sister. That is prohibited because he cannot have contact with his parents outside court-ordered supervisors and his caseworker. So we took custody. My sister and brother-in-law have made 0 efforts to focus on their son since losing custody. They have expressed no remorse or regret for what happened. They also turned down help offered by CPS, including therapy and support to allow them to spend more time with my nephew and not just my niece. My parents hate that my husband and I got custody over them. They hate that we're not defying CPS orders and bringing him around his parents and sister. They hate that we tell them nothing about how he's doing or what he talks about. They have asked me repeatedly if he regrets what he said, if he misses his parents and sister, and if he wants to go back. They have also asked what his court-appointed therapist has said. They wanted to attend therapy sessions, but the caseworker said not to. We had already done that, but she wanted me to know it was official and that I could back myself up if needed. There is technically nothing stopping me from talking about him since they are blood relatives, but given everything, I feel it's best not to. My parents told me recently that he's their grandson, and just because I have custody, it doesn't mean I can work against the rest of the family. They said I should not be keeping things about their grandson from them. They also told me they know I can talk about it. Am I the asshole? You are not to blame. They want you to defy a court order and give them access to confidential information, which isn't in your nephew's best interest. Your parents are advocating for your sister and brother-in-law, but you're doing the right thing by prioritizing your nephew's well-being. Their attempt to claim grandparent rights shows a warped view of the situation. Am I the jerk for telling my parents I have hobbies? So I, a 17-year-old girl, got in an argument with my parents, a 47-year-old man, and a 46-year-old woman last night during dinner. My dad basically talked about how I have no hobbies, no personality, no social life, and how my lack of interest will prevent me from getting a job and such. His last comment that really ticked me off was when he called me an empty shell of a human being. I went berserk. I used to like painting until he said he wouldn't buy me more paint because I was wasting it on garbage art that looked awful. This was literally my second time painting, and I was 8 years old. I used to like baking, but he told me my baking was burnt and nasty. It wasn't burnt. My neighbors and I, who I gave some of the baked goods to, loved it. I used to like cooking, but my mom said it wasn't good, and I probably should stop before I poisoned them. They had a good laugh at my mom's joke. I used to like sewing, but my mom said she wouldn't teach me since there was no point, and I would end up quitting anyway. She was referring to my other hobbies that I gave up, but I had reasons for it. I like skip roping and basketball. I like dress designing and embroidery. I liked hairstyling and doing nails. I liked writing novels and books in general. I was interested in ballet and gymnastics too. I liked writing poems. I had so many things I liked doing. I was in 3 clubs. They were the Future Medical Profession Club, the Baking Club, and the Photography Club. My dad told me he wouldn't drive me anymore because it was too much work and I should study more instead. I had to cancel plans because my parents wouldn't allow me to go out with friends. I had an interest in cardiovascular medicine, but they told me I was too stupid for it. They said I was too stupid to also do engineering and that I would never make it as a scientist. They said writing doesn't pay enough and my designs are ugly, so no one would buy clothes I make, etc. They ruined my interests, and now they are upset I have none. I no longer have the interest to go out with friends or do anything quite literally. At the end of this, I was crying. I was genuinely in shambles. My parents were shocked and just didn't say anything. I got up and went to my room and called my friend to vent. She basically told me that she understood what I meant, but I can't speak to my parents that way. She said that they want the best for me and that they were looking out so I didn't waste time on unnecessary hobbies that would do me no good. I hung up on her and texted the group chat and I basically got the same response. Am I going insane? I still don't think I am wrong at all. Am I the asshole? Wow, that's rough. It's clear that the parents' constant criticism and lack of support have really taken a toll. It's no wonder there's no interest in hobbies or social activities anymore. Hopefully, they realize the impact their words are having soon. Am I the jerk for telling my sibling to stop talking about their divorce around me? My sister and her husband are getting a divorce. He moved out of the family home and filed. My sister didn't see it coming despite warnings that it could happen because she went behind his back. She married him knowing he had absolutely no interest in having his mother, stepfather, or half-siblings in his life. He did not like his stepfather. He did not want half-siblings. That was something everyone in our family knew. He was open about having no desire for contact. My sister married him, had children with him, and then decided he was wrong to deny his family for being steps and halves. She started making contact and introducing the children behind his back. She argued with him when he found out and said if nobody else, his half-siblings deserved to be included because they were the most innocent in his family. They didn't ask to be born and weren't a part of any of the wrongs his mother and stepfather did. He told her he wanted nothing to do with them and they weren't his real siblings anyway. He also told her she had gone behind his back and betrayed his trust, and he was not going to stand for it or allow their children to see that man as grandpa or those kids as aunts and uncles. My sister doesn't want her marriage to end but has also been angry at her husband because he's correcting stuff. She told their children about the stepfather and half-siblings. He has told their children they are not family and stuff. She's mad at him for that because the children are more resistant now to contact with their paternal side and don't call them grandparents, aunts, or uncles anymore. But she also doesn't want to divorce her husband. It's a mess. It's crazy. My parents are encouraging her to open up and talk about it. I'm less sympathetic and patient. It's 6 months on from him filing, and I can't be around my extended family without hearing about this. My sister goes from bad-mouthing her husband to saying she hopes he calls off the divorce and they can work out and be a family again. My sister also tries to talk to me one-on-one about it. I think my reason for being so indifferent to this and annoyed about hearing it is because she knew how he felt. She knew what his boundaries were regarding his family. She had a choice not to marry him. She had a choice not to go behind his back. To expect he'd be fine with it when she knew, regardless of what anyone thinks of his actions, hers were not that smart and should not come as a surprise. I don't feel bad for her. I do, however, feel bad for the children caught in the middle. When my sister tried to talk about the divorce again 2 or 3 days ago, I asked her to stop talking about it with and around me. She asked how I could be so cold and I told her it wasn't like people didn't warn her. My parents did before they got married because they didn't love how her husband felt about the half-siblings. Hearing about this over and over is getting so old. Am I the asshole? You are not responsible for this. Your sister created this mess by ignoring a firm boundary her husband had set, and now she expects a hype crew. She has a wide range of people who can console her and let her rant. Some people are better at offering practical support than emotional, and that's okay. If she doesn't understand why this is happening, she never will. Am I the jerk for bringing up something small my parent did a long time ago to defend my sibling? Okay, so a 19-year-old male, and my father, who is 54 years old, were recently on the phone. They are in Florida, and I couldn't go because my grandfather on my mother's side died unexpectedly, and I had to attend the funeral. My littlest half-sister, who is around 7 years old, we'll call her S, was upset because they wouldn't play her version of hide and seek. She is rather heavy and therefore somewhat slow, so she wanted to play a version of hide and seek, where if the seeker catches you, you become a seeker and help them. This way, she can catch people easier and still be involved if she gets caught, which is what they do at her school. Instead, they were playing a version where, if you get tagged, you just go to an area and wait out until the hider or seeker wins. The set area is also the base. She can't really catch anyone that way without help. My dad was laughing and acting like her version was stupid. Years ago, I had basically run into the same problem. I was a big kid and therefore a lot slower than most other people, like my cousins and siblings. We would play hide and seek a lot. We played basically any time we went somewhere that was big and fairly empty. They would play the version where if you get caught, you just go to the base and wait. If I was the seeker, I would basically never win. I only won once. If I was the hider, I was usually the first person to get caught. For the record, I don't really have fun when I'm playing a game and losing over and over. It usually kills my mood. One day I tried bringing up playing my version of hide and seek, so that way I actually had a chance at winning. My dad and former stepmom, I should mention my dad divorced her a while back, and now has a new wife that I'm rather close with, for some reason acted like my game was stupid and laughed it off. My dad made a compromise with me where we could play my version sometime. However, they never did, and when I would bring it up, my dad would say, "Remember the compromise," and tell me to play their version. It really bothered me when I was younger, but as I grew up, I didn't mind as much. I have no idea what their intentions were, as they're not the kind of parents to make their kids miserable. I told Dad that they should play my version with her so she could catch some people, and explained that it hurt me how they would never play my version growing up. I wasn't angrily telling him off. I was just explaining that she was probably feeling what I felt, as we're both on the spectrum. My dad was quiet and then hung up. I texted him and he sent me this really long text explaining that he didn't like how petty I was being, which really confused me as I had made it clear I wasn't holding a grudge and was just explaining something to him. Am I the asshole? You are not the one to blame. He's acting out because he's embarrassed and probably knows he treated you wrong in the past, especially when agreeing to change the game and not following through. The issue isn't just what he did in the past, it's that he still hasn't learned and is repeating the same behaviors, potentially hurting your sister. As a dad, he needs to step up and advocate for her, and sometimes adjusting the rules on occasion can be appropriate. Maybe now that you've pointed it out, he'll treat her better, but if he hasn't learned yet, it's doubtful he will now. Thanks for watching. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications so you never miss a video. To finish listening to all the stories, check out the playlist in the description.